My fiancée wanted to test my devotion, so she handed me $30 million out of the blue to see if I was only after her fortune. She told me to take the cash and use it for whatever my heart truly desired. She had it all figured out. If I spent that money on luxury cars or a mansion, she would leave me and never look back. What she didn't expect was that I would use that money to buy a remote island and stock it with a lifetime of supplies before vanishing from her life forever. The real estate agent was speechless because the island was so obscure it didn't even show up on GPS maps. That was exactly what I wanted, a place completely cut off from the rest of civilization. Mr. Edward, are you absolutely certain about this purchase? If you move there, staying in touch with the outside world will be nearly impossible, the man on the phone warned me. I nodded, feeling a sense of profound relief as I spoke. That is exactly the point. I do not want anyone to find me ever again. There was a brief silence on the other end as the agent processed my strange request, but he remained professional. He walked me through the closing process and told me the earliest date I could take possession. When I realized the paperwork would be finished in just a few days, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, so I paid the full amount and walked out. In my past life, I died before I could even touch that money. This time around, I woke up right after my engagement to Miriam. Having a second chance at life taught me one vital lesson. I would never sacrifice my own happiness for others again. As I stepped out of the agency, a sleek black sedan screeched to a halt right in front of me. The door flew open and Miriam hurried toward me. She was usually the picture of composure, but she looked frantic now, her typically icy eyes filled with visible distress. This was our first meeting since my rebirth, and I instinctively called out her name. She barely looked at me before grabbing my arm and shoving me toward the vehicle. "Edward, get in. We have to go now," she commanded. I stumbled into the back seat, my head slamming against the frame with a painful thud. Miriam didn't even notice my pain as she kept her eyes glued to her phone screen. The driver tore through the streets until we reached the hospital. She practically hauled me out of the car before it even stopped and dragged me toward the infirmary. I was already sitting in front of a nurse with a needle in my arm before Miriam finally spoke. "Joey fell down the stairs, so don't worry, we won't take too much blood this time," she said coldly. Before I could respond, a stinging slap landed across my face. "Where have you been? I told you never to leave your brother's side. How dare you abandon him?" my mother screamed. My cheek burned with pain and tears stung my eyes as I stared at my mother in silence. My father stepped up and put an arm around her, glaring at me with equal intensity. "Do you have any idea how worried we were? If anything had happened to Joey, I don't know what we would have done," he growled. "I swear I will make you pay for this," my mother screamed, her voice shaking with rage. My sister, Chloe Harrison, didn't even bother to look up from her nails. "We should just put him on a leash so he stops wandering off," she remarked casually. This was my family. They were willing to tear me apart just to keep Joey safe. All of this was because I had been away from the house for less than an hour. Miriam was the only one who tried to quiet them down, but even then, it was only for Joey's sake. "Keep it down. You're going to disturb Joey's procedure," she said. No one cared how I felt. I was nothing more than a mobile blood bank for Joey Harrison. I was born for one reason. My brother Joey has hemophilia, a severe disorder that requires regular transfusions to keep him alive. My parents literally conceived me to be his personal donor. I have spent my entire life being a human blood bag, and the scars on my arms look like a roadmap of every needle I have ever taken. I grew up unloved, treated as nothing more than a biological spare part by my parents. My sister only ever acknowledged Joey as her real brother. I was the invisible child, the one who was always in the way. Miriam Vance was the only person who ever showed me even a hint of kindness. Our families have been close for generations, and since she was slightly older, I spent my childhood following her around. In a house where I was treated like a ghost, I couldn't help but fall for the only person who looked at me with a smile. When I finally worked up the nerve to tell her how I felt, she seemed more confused than happy. She didn't look excited, but she agreed anyway, and even promised she would be my wife someday. I was over the moon with joy back then. I honestly believe she loved me back. I felt like I had used up all the luck in my life just to earn a place in her heart. With her by my side, the fact that my parents and sister ignored me didn't seem to hurt as much. It took me years to realize that Miriam was actually in love with Joey. She only agreed to marry me to keep me on a short leash, so I would never stop providing blood for him. She was so obsessed with my brother that she was willing to throw away her own happiness just to keep him breathing. I was such a fool, walking around with a grin on my face, thinking I was the luckiest man alive. It is honestly pathetic how much my own ignorance hurts me now. The emergency room doors swung open and the nurses wheeled Joey out. My parents, Chloe, and Miriam immediately abandoned me to swarm around his bed. Watching them fuss over him with such desperate concern made me feel physically ill. I forced a bitter smile and pulled my sleeves down to hide the fresh injection injection marks before walking out. Once I was outside, I pulled off my engagement ring and tossed it into a trash bin without a second thought. If no one in this world was going to love me, I would just have to start loving myself. It usually took me several days to recover from a donation, and this time was no exception. My entire family stayed at the hospital with Joey for the rest of the week, leaving me alone in the house to recover by myself. I was walking into the kitchen for some water when I saw Miriam and Chloe helping Joey into the house. They were hovering over him as if he were made of glass. Chloe looked up at me, and her gentle expression immediately hardened into a look of pure contempt. "You are so lazy, just moping around the house without a single hobby or talent," Chloe snapped. "What do you have to offer compared to Joey besides those stupid paintings? I spent half my life bleeding for him and the other half recovering, so I never had the luxury of developing the skills they praised in Joey. My art was the only thing that gave me hope in this miserable life." Yet she treated it like trash. I have heard her insults 1,000 times, but they still managed to cut deep every single time. Miriam tried to play the peacemaker like she always did by asking if I was feeling unwell from the donation. Joey immediately chimed in with a fake look of concern, saying I should rest and he didn't need any special treats. Chloe rolled her eyes at me and told Joey he was being far too kind. "Everything he does for you is his duty because he was literally born to serve you," she said harshly. "Your happiness is the only reason he exists, so don't you forget it, Edward." Her words felt like 1,000 needles stabbing into my chest, but I remained silent. During dinner, the entire family ignored me while they waited on Joey hand and foot. My parents kept piling food onto Joey's plate, while Chloe even deboned his fish for him. Every single dish was one of Joey's favorites. I was quietly eating my rice when Miriam placed a piece of fried squid in my bowl. I looked at her and then at the food, feeling nothing but a sense of irony. It must be exhausting for her to keep up this charade of caring about me. As the meal wound down, my parents brought up the wedding plans. Joey put down his fork and looked at them with a fragile expression. "I've been feeling so weak lately. I don't think I'll be strong enough to attend the wedding," he sighed. He begged them to postpone the ceremony so he wouldn't miss our big day. He knew perfectly well that whatever he asked for, he would get. He just loved playing the role of the considerate brother while getting exactly what he wanted. My parents and Chloe agreed instantly without even looking at me. Miriam hesitated for a second before asking for my opinion. In my previous life, Joey had used this same tactic to keep our wedding on hold for years. I knew Miriam would never marry me without Joey's approval. "Whatever you want," I said with a shrug before leaving the table. I walked upstairs without looking back at any of them. Miriam watched me go, looking troubled as if she finally realized I wasn't the same person anymore. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the change was undeniable. Since the wedding was postponed, all the planning stopped. This gave Miriam plenty of time to take Joey on trips and enjoy themselves. Joey made sure to invite my parents and Chloe, but he purposefully left me out. He claimed he just wanted me to rest after my donation. They were a perfect little family, and I was just an intruder who would ruin their fun. I had no interest in begging for an invitation. Joey made sure to send me photos from every stop on their trip. He was always in the middle of the frame, smiling brightly while soaking up everyone's attention. He texted me about how beautiful the views were and how our parents were buying him a vacation home there. He bragged about how Chloe promised to take him anywhere he wanted. He even mentioned a massive gift from Miriam, asking if I was curious about it. I deleted his messages without reading them and turned off my phone to focus on packing. I only had to endure this for a few more days before I could leave for good. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise coming from the first floor. I froze as memories from my past life flooded back. I remembered that a burglar was supposed to break in right around this time. In my previous life, he stole the jewelry and destroyed every single one of my paintings. I didn't care about the money, but my paintings were my life. I quickly hid my art and called 911. I grabbed a kitchen knife and waited behind the door, trying to keep my breathing steady. Having lived through this before gave me an advantage. I managed to help the police catch the guy when they arrived. However, the man was much stronger than I remembered, and even knowing his moves wasn't enough to overpower him easily. I took quite a beating and ended up being shoved down the stairs, leaving my face covered in blood. By the time my family and Miriam arrived, the police were already leaving. I was sitting on the sofa in the middle of the trashed living room, bruised and bleeding. My parents were shocked into a stutter, asking why I hadn't called them and if I was trying to get myself killed. Even Chloe looked surprised. "Why didn't you call any of us for help? You made it look like we don't care about you or something," she complained. I was too exhausted to even speak. My body felt like it was falling apart. I sat there trembling, still clutching the kitchen knife. Miriam rushed over and grabbed my hand. sense. Edward, are you okay? We need to get you to a doctor. Why didn't you just call us? She asked frantically. I pulled away from her and looked them in the eye. Would any of you have actually come back if I called? I asked. They all froze, guilt flashing across their faces before they weakly insisted that they would have helped. I let out a dry laugh because I had been stupid enough to believe them in my past life. I had called every single one of them while the burglar was in the house, but no one picked up. That mistake almost cost me my life back then. I found out later they were too busy watching fireworks with Joey to care about my calls. Miriam bit her lip as she looked at me, clearly sensing that I was a different person. The old Edward would have been a sobbing mess, but now I was cold and indifferent to their presence. Miriam opened her mouth to speak, but Chloe interrupted when she spotted my suitcase. Where do you think you're going with that? She demanded. Miriam turned around, her face pale with sudden anxiety. I cursed myself for leaving the suitcase out in the open. I clenched my fists but forced a calm smile. I saw how much fun you were having on your trip and decided I needed a vacation too, so I started packing, I explained. My parents' expressions soured immediately. A vacation? I told you never to go far from Joey. My father snapped. What if he needs a transfusion while you are gone? You need to remember your purpose in this family and put those bags away right now. They told me I wasn't allowed to leave without their permission. Miriam seemed relieved that I wasn't arguing, telling me that I should travel with them next time for my own safety. I just looked at her and thought about how they would never find me where I was going. A few days later, I got a message from the agent confirming the island was officially mine. I could hardly contain my joy as I realized I finally had a place of my own. I called them back immediately to finalize the details. The agent asked one last time if I was ready to move in 3 days. I have never been more certain about anything in my entire life. He told me they would have transport ready for me on Friday morning. Miriam burst into my room just as I hung up the phone. What island were you talking about? She asked suspiciously. I slipped the phone into my pocket and asked her what she wanted, ignoring her question. She didn't press the issue and simply told me that I had won a prize in the National Art Competition. I had almost forgotten about the entry I submitted a month ago. I knew I was talented, but actually winning a national award was a huge surprise. On the day of the ceremony, Joey insisted that the whole family should go to support me. He made a big show of being a proud brother before sighing about his own poor health. He lamented that he never had the chance to study art, but claimed that my success was basically his success. I didn't say anything, but I had a bad feeling about the whole thing. As the ceremony began, I sat in the audience with sweaty palms, waiting for the big announcement. This was the moment I had been working toward for years. This award was my chance to finally be seen as an individual rather than just a donor. The host opened the envelope and looked confused for a split second before putting on a fake smile. And the winner is Joey Harrison, he announced to the crowd. The room filled with confused whispers as people looked around for this unknown artist. Some people mentioned that they had heard the award was supposed to go to me for my piece titled Sunset. I sat there in total shock, unable to believe what I was hearing. I was frozen in my seat, my brain struggling to process the betrayal. I tried to stand up to demand an explanation from the organizers, but Chloe grabbed my arm and forced me back down. She looked at me with a warning in her eyes. "Don't you dare make a scene," she hissed. "I called them an hour ago and had them change the name on the trophy." She told me that Joey deserved the spotlight and that all my future work would be credited to him. I looked at my parents, but they were beaming with pride at Joey as he walked onto the stage. When they glanced at me, they just looked annoyed. "Stop being so selfish. It is just a trophy," my father whispered. Miriam didn't even look at me. Her eyes were glued to Joey. She was mesmerized by Joey, completely ignoring the fact that I was trembling with rage. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized they had stolen my moment of glory. My entire family had teamed up to rob me of my own achievement. Joey thanked everyone in his speech, but didn't say a single word about me. When we got home, I went to my room and gathered every single thing I owned. I dragged my paintings, my carvings, and even my old clothes into the living room and dumped them at Joey's feet. Joey jumped back in surprise and asked me what I was doing. I looked at him with a dead expression and told him that if he wanted my work, he could have everything. Not just the art, take it all. It is all yours now, I said coldly. I looked around at my parents and sister and decided right then that he could have them too. I went back to my room without eating and locked the door to finish my packing. I was done with every single one of them. My parents just stood outside my door and complained about my bad attitude. They couldn't understand why I was so upset over a few paintings. My father muttered that I was getting too big for my boots. Miriam eventually knocked and asked if I want to come out and eat. I looked at the door, but felt absolutely nothing for her anymore. Chloe eventually dragged her away, telling her to let me sulk as much as I wanted. "He is just looking for attention, Miriam," Chloe said as they walked away. I sat in the dark and smiled to myself. They had no idea that by this time tomorrow, I would be gone forever. I woke up early the next morning only to find the house empty. I checked my phone and saw that they had left in the middle of the night. They had taken Joey up to Mount Greylock for some kind of spiritual retreat. Apparently, there's a famous shrine at the summit where you have to hang a prayer plaque before sunrise. It made sense they left early since everything they did was for Joey's well-being. They were obsessed with ensuring his safety at all costs. I scrolled through their Facebook posts and saw nothing but photos of Joey. My father posted a wish for Joey's lifelong happiness. My mother wrote a post calling him her precious baby and wishing him a perfect life. Chloe posted a wish for Joey to have a peaceful future. Miriam was the only one who didn't post his face, instead sharing a photo of a plaque that said, "May you be well always." I remembered how in my past life, she would go to that shrine every single year despite claiming not to be superstitious. I used to think those prayers were for me. It wasn't until the day I died that I realized Joey's name was written on the back of every single one of them. My gratitude for her supposed love was nothing but a pathetic joke. I'm just glad I got a second chance to see the truth before it was too late. I was never going to make that mistake again. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message welcoming me to my new life. The message told me to head to the airport where a car was waiting to take me to the island. I smiled as I turned off the phone for the last time. I placed the legal papers to sever my ties with the family on the dining table. I stopped at the door and remembered the silver necklace around my neck. It was a Vance family heirloom that Miriam had given me after I proposed. She told me that whoever wore it was destined to be her husband and the head of her estate. I had no interest in being part of her family or her future anymore. I placed the necklace on top of the legal documents and picked up my suitcase. As I was walking out, my phone started vibrating like crazy in my pocket. I had dozens of missed calls from my parents, Chloe, and Miriam. I checked our family group chat and saw a wall of frantic messages tagging me. Something had clearly gone wrong on their trip. Joey had fallen down the mountain and was bleeding out. They were ordering me to get to the hospital within 30 minutes to give him blood. They were already blaming me for the accident before I even knew it happened. I stood in the driveway for a long moment before quietly leaving the group chat. I blocked every single one of their numbers. I was done being Joey's blood bag and the unwanted second son of the Harrison family. From now on, I belonged only to myself. I took one final look at the house I had called home for 20 years. Then I climbed into the waiting car and told the driver to go. We sped away and I didn't look back even once. My old SIM card lay snapped in half on the pavement behind us. Back at the hospital, Joey was lying in a bed looking like a ghost. He looked like he was in agony with his eyes shut tight. My parents were pacing the room in a panic while Chloe tried to call me over and over. Every time she dialed, she just got a recording saying the number was no longer in service. Miriam stood in the corner with a dark expression on her face. She pulled out her phone and made a call to her assistant. "Find me an O-negative donor and get them here now. I don't care what it costs," she barked. She hung up and went back to Joey's side, watching him with intense worry. Once the transfusion from the new donor was complete, Joey started to look a bit better. My family finally stopped panicking for a moment. Miriam still looked troubled as she told Joey to rest while she went to check on me. She drove back to the house and was immediately struck by how silent it was. The usual tension was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. She walked into the living room and saw the legal documents and the heirloom necklace sitting on the table. All the color drained from her face as she realized what it meant. She picked up the papers, her hands trembling as she saw my signature at the bottom. My parents and Chloe arrived shortly after and were just as stunned. My mother was the first to react, screaming as she grabbed the papers and tore them into tiny pieces. She kept shouting about how she would never let me leave the family. "How dare that ungrateful brat do this to us?" my mother shrieked. My father's face was dark with rage as he claimed I was just throwing a tantrum. He told them I would be crawling back for money within a week. Chloe scoffed and said I was just acting out for attention. "He needs to be put in his place, but Joey is the priority right now," she said. She was furious that I had chosen this moment to cause drama while Joey was in the hospital. They slammed the door and headed back to the hospital, leaving Miriam alone in the living room. She clutched the necklace tightly, her heart sinking with a terrible feeling of dread. She wondered if I was actually serious about leaving them forever. She tried to convince herself that I would come back because of my love for her. She tucked the necklace into her pocket and hurried back to the hospital. They all gathered outside Joey's room, still consumed by their own worries. As they reached the door, they heard Joey speaking inside. He sounded perfectly fine as he bragged to someone on the phone. "I'm exhausted from pretending to fall down that mountain, but it was worth it to finally get rid of him," he said with a laugh. He laughed about how he had faked feints and falls for years to make me look bad. He even admitted to accidentally hitting me with the car once. He finally took the bait and left, so now I don't have to share the attention with anyone. He chuckled. "Now I don't even have to pretend to be sick anymore," he added. The people outside the door were frozen in shock, unable to believe what they were hearing. They had always seen Joey as a sweet, fragile boy who could do no wrong. The realization that Joey had been manipulating them for years hit them like a ton of bricks. My parents and Chloe burst into the room, their faces pale with fury. Joey was so startled that he dropped his phone, the screen cracking on the floor. "How could you do this, Joey?" my mother whispered, her voice trembling with hurt. Joey scrambled out of bed and grabbed their hands, begging for forgiveness. He cried about how he was only afraid of losing their affection to me. He claimed that he felt threatened when I was born and feared that I would steal their hearts. My parents were shaking with a mix of rage and confusion as they listened to his excuses. They couldn't believe their favorite child was capable of such malice. "We literally created him to save your life," my father roared. "How could you ever think we loved him more than you? We have given you everything you ever wanted, so why would you play these sick games?" Chloe was just as angry as her parents. "I spent hours comforting you after that car accident because I thought it was a mistake," she shouted. "I watched my other brother bleed while I held your hand, and now you tell me you did it on purpose?" Joey was desperate now, clinging to their sleeves and crying for mercy. He promised it would never happen again and reminded them that he was their favorite. He begged them to look past his mistake because of how much they loved him. "Mom, Dad, think about who takes care of you when you have migraines," he pleaded. "And Chloe, remember when I pulled you out of that construction site when the wall collapsed?" Chloe hesitated, and my parents seemed to be reconsidering their anger for a moment. Joey turned his tearful eyes toward Miriam. "Miriam, you love me, don't you? You told me you fell for me the day I was playing piano in the garden," he sobbed. He admitted that treating me as a blood bank was wrong, but claimed his jealousy was born out of his love for her. Miriam looked sick to her stomach as she realized she had been played. She had always thought Joey was an innocent soul. Suddenly, the old housekeeper who had been standing in the corner dropped to her knees and started to cry. "I can't stay silent anymore. I have to tell the truth," she cried out. "You have all been lied to by Joey for years." She revealed that it was actually me who made the aromatherapy for my parents, while Joey just took the credit. She told Chloe that it was actually me who pulled her out of the rubble during the earthquake. Then she turned to Miriam and told her that I was the one playing the piano that day in the garden. Joey had simply arrived later and let Miriam believe he was the one with the talent. The room went deathly silent as the truth finally came out. My family and Miriam looked like they had been struck by lightning. They were beginning to realize how monstrous their favorite child actually was. Joey's face turned ghostly white, and he glared at the housekeeper with pure hatred. "You are lying," he screamed at the top of his lungs. "I did all those things. She is just trying to frame me." The housekeeper just shook her head sadly. "You know the truth, Joey," she said. "Edward never received a shred of love from this family. Not from his parents, his sister, or even his fiancée. The staff saw everything he did for you," she continued. "I asked him once why he didn't defend himself, and he told me it was pointless because no one would ever believe him over Joey. He told me he wished he had never been born." My family looked like they were going to collapse under the weight of their own guilt. Joey was hysterical now, jumping out of bed and accusing the housekeeper of taking bribes from me. He kept screaming that it was all a lie. The housekeeper just looked at him with pity. "Joey, your monthly allowance is $100,000 while Edward only gets $60," she said quietly. "Where would he get the money to bribe anyone? I am only speaking out because I couldn't stand to watch you destroy him anymore." Miriam looked at my parents in horror. "Is it true? You only gave him $60 a month?" she asked. My parents couldn't even look her in the eye as they tried to find the right words. "We didn't have a set schedule. We just gave him money whenever we remembered," my father stammered. The truth was that they almost never remembered because Joey was their only priority. Chloe looked like she was going to be sick as she remembered my frayed clothes and worn-out shoes. She remembered catching me working odd jobs for extra cash. Instead of helping, she had screamed at me for embarrassing the family name. She remembered yelling at me and asking why I was working when the family provided everything. I had just stood there with tears in my eyes and said nothing. Now she realized that I didn't have a single cent to my name. I couldn't even keep a regular job because I had to be available for Joey's transfusions at a moment's notice. Chloe felt a wave of nausea as the weight of her cruelty finally hit her. She felt like she was suffocating under the pressure of her own guilt. Joey realized he was losing them, so he grabbed their arms and started crying again. "I am your real son, your real brother," he wailed. "Miriam, you love me. Don't let this old woman ruin everything we have." In the past, they would have believed him, but his earlier confession on the phone was still ringing in their ears. For the first time in his life, they pushed him away. They looked at him with a mixture of horror and profound disappointment. Miriam's expression was like ice as she pulled out her phone to call her private investigator. Joey collapsed onto the floor, knowing that his charade was finally over. The assistant began the background check immediately. Within an hour, a thick report was delivered to Miriam. It confirmed everything the housekeeper said and revealed even more disturbing secrets. Miriam's hands were shaking as she handed the file over to my parents. As they read the report, they looked like they were going to faint. They discovered that Joey hadn't just stolen credit for my deeds. He had actively paid people to bully me throughout my school years. They finally understood why I used to come home covered in bruises. They had always blamed me for being a troublemaker, never realizing that Joey was the one paying people to jump me. The report showed he had even hired thugs who would have killed me if I hadn't escaped. My parents couldn't believe they had raised such a monster in their own home. Chloe was crying with a mix of regret and pure hatred as she looked at Joey. "He's your own flesh and blood, Joey. How could you be so evil to your own brother?" she screamed. Joey realized there was no point in lying anymore, so his entire demeanor changed. He started laughing like a maniac, admitting to everything with a twisted sense of pride. "So what if I did it? I wanted him gone. I deserved everything," he shouted. "You told me I was your only son and that you would only ever love me," he screamed at our parents. "Why did you have to bring him into this world? If you wanted him as a blood bank, that was fine, but that is all he should have been. He tried to steal your affection by doing all those nice things, making me look like a terrible brother," he yelled. He turned to Miriam and accused her of falling for the wrong person, claiming he was the one who loved her first. "Why do you have to be the one playing that stupid piano?" he demanded. "I loved you first, but you only had eyes for him, so I did what I had to do to take his place." His laughter filled the room, sounding cold and hollow. My family and Miriam looked at him with absolute horror, finally seeing the monster he truly was. "Joey," Miriam said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "you're going to pay for every single thing you have done." Joey just laughed in her face, claiming that as the Harrison heir, no one could touch him. My father stepped forward, his face set in a hard line. "As of this moment, you are no longer a Harrison. I am disowning you," he declared. Joey's eyes went wide as he realized his safety net was gone. He started wailing about his condition, asking how he would survive without the family's money and support. He begged them to reconsider, but they only looked at him with cold, tired eyes. They had finally reached their breaking point and refused to listen to another word. Miriam walked out of the room, her only thought being to find me and beg for my forgiveness. She realized that I was the one she had actually loved all along. She was devastated thinking about how she had treated me over the years. She feared that I already knew the dark truth behind why she had entered my life. She finally understood why I had left so suddenly and returned her family's necklace. She blamed herself for being so blind and never questioning the lies Joey told her. She had been so close to marrying the man she actually loved, and she was determined to find me. She used every resource at her disposal to search the city, but it was as if I had vanished into thin air. Miriam looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. Every failed lead felt like a physical blow to her heart. My parents and Chloe were just as desperate, sitting by the phone waiting for any scrap of information. My mother couldn't stop crying, repeating that it was all their fault for driving me away. She lamented that if they had just been kinder to me, I would still be with them. My father looked like he had aged a decade in just a few days, his usual confidence replaced by soul-crushing guilt. Chloe was out on the streets, showing my picture to everyone she saw and begging for help. No one had seen me, and with each passing day, their hope began to fade. Miriam refused to give up, expanding her search from the city to the entire country. She was prepared to search the whole world if that was what it took. My parents plastered the city with missing posters, praying for a lead. Chloe was constantly posting on Twitter and Facebook, begging people to share my photo. However, all they got in return was deafening silence. Finally, a private investigator called with a potential lead in a small town in Vermont. He had spotted someone who matched my description. Miriam jumped in her car and raced to the location, her mind racing with a mix of desperate hope and terrifying fear. When she finally arrived at the address, her heart broke when the boy turned around. He looked just like me from behind, but his face was that of a complete stranger. She felt a crushing weight of despair as she realized it was another dead end. She returned home looking like a ghost, and my family knew immediately that the lead had failed. My mother collapsed onto the floor in tears while my father sat beside her with his head in his hands. He wept silently as the reality of my disappearance finally set in. Chloe slammed her fist against the sofa and screamed my name, asking why I was punishing them. Just as they were about to give up, Miriam remembered something I had told her years ago. I had once mentioned that my dream was to live on a secluded island where I could paint in peace forever. A light bulb went off in her head as she wondered if I had actually bought an island. She immediately got back to work, searching for records of recent private island sales in remote areas. After hours of digging, she found a record of a quiet purchase of a small island off the coast of Maine. She gathered my family, and they immediately chartered a boat to the coordinates. The island was beautiful and serene, and for the first time in weeks, they felt a glimmer of real hope. They started searching the the woods and beaches for any sign of a home. Miriam's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She was shaking with nerves as they pushed through a thicket of pine trees. Suddenly, she saw a figure standing in a clearing with an easel. I was so focused on my painting that I didn't even hear them approaching. Miriam stepped forward, her voice trembling as she whispered my name. I froze for a second before slowly turning around to face them. I was surprised to see them there, but I quickly regained my composure. "What are you doing here?" I asked calmly, my voice carrying easily in the quiet air. My mother broke down and ran toward me, throwing her arms around me while sobbing about how sorry she was. My father and Chloe stood behind her, their faces etched with a mix of relief and deep shame. Miriam stayed back, looking at me with eyes full of unspoken apologies. She finally understood that all of my pain had been caused by the people standing in front of me. She was afraid that her presence would only make things worse for me. I pulled away from my mother's embrace and looked at them with a cold expression. "I think you have the wrong person," I said. "I am Edward, not your precious Joey." My words hit them like a physical blow. Chloe grabbed my hand and desperately started explaining that they knew everything now. She told me they had discovered all of Joey's lies and the suffering he had put me through. She told me they realized that I was the one who actually deserved their love and respect. She was sobbing as she spoke, her voice thick with regret. I just watched her, unmoved by her tears. I gave her a cold, empty smile. "So now that Joey's a monster, you want me back?" I asked. "Don't you think you were a little late for that?" My mother started wailing even louder, clutching my hand and begging me to come home. She kept saying that she couldn't live without her son. I simply looked down at her hand and pulled away. I stepped back and told them that there was no going back to how things were. "I have a new life here and a new family," I said quietly. My father looked at me in total shock, asking what I meant by new family. I told them about how I had rescued a family from a boating accident near the island. They invited me to be a part of their family to show their gratitude. I explained, "They have given me more love in the last few days than you have in my entire life." Miriam looked worried and warned me that I didn't know anything about these strangers. She begged me to come home with them and promised we would get married immediately. She seemed desperate to fix things by returning to our old plans. "I know I messed up, but please just give me one more chance," she pleaded. I looked at her with pure indifference. "Do you honestly think a simple apology is going to make up for years of abuse, Miriam?" I asked. I told her that my desire for her love had turned into a clear understanding of the pain she caused. "I don't want the wedding, and I don't want you," I said firmly. My mother tried to intervene again, promising to make everything right if I just came home. I told them to leave because I was finally happy with people who actually cared about me. My father looked at me with deep regret, admitting he had been blinded by Joey's lies. He begged me for one more chance to be the father I deserved. Hearing those words once would have meant everything to me, but now they were meaningless. Some wounds are just too deep to ever truly heal. I just wanted to be left alone to live my life in peace. Chloe apologized for how she had treated me and promised to make it up to me. I just shook my head and told her that the past was dead. I had a new life now, and I had no intention of returning to that house. Miriam was desperate, clinging to the hope that I still loved her. She swore that her feelings for me were real and promised to spend the rest of her life making it up to me. She begged for just one more chance to prove herself. I couldn't help but laugh at her. "Your love is cheap, Miriam," I said. "It was nothing more than a tool you used to keep your donor close to Joey." My family looked down at their feet, unable to deny the truth of my words. They knew they had a long road ahead of them if they wanted my forgiveness. I turned my back on them and walked toward my house. Little did I know, they had already decided to stay on the island until I agreed to talk to them. They followed me like lost puppies as I headed back to my home. Mrs. Sterling was waiting for me on the porch with a warm smile. She looked at the strangers following me with a hint of curiosity. "Edward, you are finally back," Mrs. Sterling said as she walked down the steps. "Your father made those ribs you love, and I have got some fresh cherries waiting. We were all worried about you." She scolded me gently for not wearing a jacket while I was out painting. She mentioned that her daughter had been looking for me all afternoon and was about to start a search party. I felt a warmth in my chest that I had never experienced with my biological family. I was about to respond when a beautiful girl stepped out from behind her mother. "I told you to stop calling me his sister, Mom," she teased. I never agreed to that role. I felt my face flush at her comment. My new parents have been so incredibly kind to me since I arrived. For the first time in 20 years, I actually understood what it felt like to be wanted. Audrey Sterling had been especially attentive, and I was old enough to know it wasn't sisterly love. There was a spark in her eyes that made it clear she saw me as more than just a stray they had picked up. She looked at me with genuine interest and affection. Mrs. Sterling just smiled and patted her daughter's arm. "Fine, he doesn't have to call you that," she said with a wink. "Who knows what the future holds for you two anyway." They ushered me inside, fussing over me as if I were the most important person in the world. My biological family and Miriam stood by the gate, watching the whole scene in stunned silence. They had never treated me with even a fraction of that warmth. They recognized the way the Sterlings were treating me because that was how they had always treated Joey. They had seen that same longing for affection in my eyes for years, but had simply chosen to ignore it. Now, they were seeing someone else give me exactly what I had always wanted. I finally had the love I deserved, but it didn't come from my own blood. My parents were devastated, and Miriam was consumed by a toxic mix of regret and jealousy. She couldn't stand seeing another woman look at me that way. Miriam knew exactly what Audrey was thinking just by looking at her. Once we were settled at the table, the Sterlings noticed my family still standing outside. They asked me who the well-dressed strangers were. I didn't even look toward the door as I answered. "Don't worry about them. They're nobody important," I said coldly. My words cut through my biological family like a knife. My mother sobbed into her hands, her body shaking with grief. My father's eyes were red with unshed tears as the weight of his years of neglect finally crushed him. He was drowning in his own regret. Chloe stared at the floor, her fists clenched in self-hatred. Miriam couldn't take her eyes off Audrey and me, her jealousy coiling around her heart like a viper. She realized just how much she had truly lost. She had assumed I would always be there, waiting for her to finally notice me. Now, she was faced with the reality that another woman was giving me the love she had withheld for so long. She saw that I was finally happy without her. Audrey sensed the tension from the gate and looked up with a sharp, possessive glare. She reached out and took my hand in hers, clearly staking her claim. She wasn't going to let them hurt me again. I felt my face heat up at her touch, but I didn't pull away. I knew she was trying to protect me from the pain those people represented. I was grateful to have someone finally standing up for me. My biological family and Miriam refused to leave, standing outside the house for 3 whole days. I ignored them completely, focusing on my new life and my art. I had no interest in hearing anything they had to say. By the 3rd day, they were in a pitiful state, looking haggard and broken. My mother, who had always been fragile, finally collapsed from exhaustion and dehydration. They were all at their breaking point. My father and Chloe panicked as they tried to help her. I heard the shouting from inside the house and felt a brief pang of concern despite myself. I hated that I still cared about her well-being. Audrey squeezed my hand and gave me a reassuring look. She told me she was there for me and then went to open the front door. "You should bring her inside before she gets any worse," she told them. They were so grateful as they carried my mother into the living room. When she finally woke up, she immediately reached for my hand. "Edward, thank you for letting us in," she whispered. "Does this mean you are coming home with us?" I pulled my hand away as if she were made of fire. "No, it doesn't mean that at all," I said coldly. "I just didn't want a corpse on my doorstep." The hope died in her eyes instantly. Miriam looked at me with bloodshot eyes and promised she would never stop trying. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to stay here until I earn it," she said. She claimed she would wait on the island forever if that was what it took. I just looked at her with disbelief. "You are the heir to a multi-billion-dollar corporation, Miriam," I said. "Do you really expect me to believe you are going to abandon your life for this?" She didn't even hesitate before saying yes. My parents and Chloe joined in, promising that they would give up everything just to have me back in the family. They looked so desperate that it was almost pathetic. I told them I was never going back to their house. "If you want to stay here and rot, go ahead, but I'm leaving this island anyway," I informed them. I explained that I had originally come here to be alone, but the Sterlings had changed my mind. Audrey had told me they were heading back to the mainland to deal with some business and asked me to join them. I realized that my future wasn't on this island, but with them. Audrey told me that if I stayed, they would stay with me forever. Their devotion moved me in a way my own family never had. "It doesn't matter where I am as long as I am with people who love me," I told my family as I explained my decision to leave with the Sterlings. Miriam felt a surge of bitterness as she realized how much I valued Audrey's words. They had suffered for 3 days just to get through the door, and here I was changing my entire life for a woman I had just met. It was a clear sign of where my heart was now. She felt a sharp pain in her chest as she realized I might never be hers again. She stubbornly insisted on following me wherever I went, refusing to let me go that easily. She was determined to win me back no matter what it took. We left the island together, with my biological family trailing behind us like shadows. Once we docked, I immediately got into a private car and headed toward the Sterling estate. I didn't even acknowledge the people following us. Audrey blocked them at the gates of the estate, informing them that it was private property. They were too exhausted to argue and knew they couldn't just force their way in. They watched from the street as the gates closed behind us. They decided to find a hotel and try again later, exhausted by their ordeal. I knew the Sterlings were wealthy, but I was completely unprepared for the scale of their home. It was more of a palace than a house. I used to think my parents were rich, but they were nothing compared to the Sterlings. Their home was a literal mansion with soaring ceilings and priceless art everywhere. The sheer opulence of the place was staggering. Everything about the estate screamed wealth and power. Mr. Sterling put a hand on my shoulder and told me to make myself at home. "This is your house now, Edward, so just relax," he said with a warm smile. Mrs. Sterling gave me a tour of the house while Audrey walked beside me, her eyes filled with affection. I suddenly realized something and stopped in my tracks. I looked at them with a questioning expression. "Are you guys related to the Sterlings from the Forbes list?" I asked tentatively. They all shared a soft smile as they looked at me. It was clear that I had stumbled into something much bigger than I thought. Audrey took my hand and admitted that they hadn't wanted to overwhelm me at first. She explained that their fame made it difficult to trust people, but they had seen my true character on the island. "Yes, Edward, we are those Sterlings," she confirmed. I was absolutely speechless, unable to process the fact that I had rescued the wealthiest family in the world. I took a few steps back, feeling completely out of place. I couldn't believe my luck was actually changing this much. I told them I wouldn't have accepted their offer if I had known who they were. I started to turn away, feeling like I didn't belong in their world. Audrey suddenly threw her arms around me from behind, stopping me in my tracks. "My parents already love you, Edward," Audrey whispered. "You can't just leave us now." Her parents joined in, promising that their wealth changed nothing about how they felt. They were determined to keep me as part of their family. I felt like I was living in a dream and didn't deserve such wonderful parents. They fell silent for a moment, and I realized they had already researched my troubled past. They knew exactly what I had been through with the Harrisons. Audrey looked me in the eye and told me that I was the kindest person she had ever met. She told me I deserved happiness more than anyone else. "Do I really deserve all this?" I asked, and all three of them nodded immediately. Tears welled up in my eyes as I finally agreed to stay. My life at the Sterling estate felt like a beautiful dream. I was finally being treated with the love and respect I had always craved. My new parents made sure I had everything I needed, even making sure my favorite breakfast was ready every morning. Audrey was my constant companion, showing me around the massive house and taking me to their private theater. We spent hours watching her favorite films together. We would sit close together on the sofa, talking about our lives and our dreams. When I told them I wanted to get back into painting, they were thrilled to support me. They were the first people to ever truly believe in my talent. Mr. Sterling built me a beautiful, state-of-the-art studio right in the house. It was stocked with the best supplies money could buy. Mrs. Sterling even curated a collection of famous paintings for me to study and draw inspiration from. They even hired a world-famous artist to be my private tutor. Audrey spent most of her afternoons in the studio with me, just watching me work. I could see the love in her eyes growing every single day. The Sterlings hosted amazing parties where I met people from all over the world. They always introduced me as a member of their family with such pride. Being around such supportive people helped me find my confidence and finally share my art with the world. Audrey was always by my side, making me feel safe and secure. When I caught a cold, the entire family hovered over me to make sure I had everything I needed. I had never felt so taken care of in my entire life. Mr. Sterling would call in the best doctors just to be safe. Mrs. Sterling even made me homemade soup and sat by my bed to make sure I ate every bite. Their kindness was overwhelming. Audrey refused to leave my side when I was unwell, her eyes filled with genuine concern. With their love and support, I finally felt like I was becoming the person I was always meant to be. I was no longer just a shadow in someone else's life. I was no longer the broken, insecure boy I used to be. I was a man who felt loved and valued. Meanwhile, my biological family and Miriam were doing everything they could to get back into my life. They were desperate for a second chance that I wasn't sure I could give. My parents sent me handwritten letters every day, apologizing for years of neglect and recalling memories from my childhood. They seemed genuinely sorry, but I felt absolutely nothing when I read their words. The damage they did was far too deep for letters to fix. this. My life with the Sterlings was so perfect that it almost made me forget the pain of my past. However, that didn't mean I was ready to forgive my family or Miriam for what they had put me through. Some scars never truly go away. I eventually got a letter from Miriam asking for one last meeting. I wasn't sure if I should go, but I decided I needed closure. I wanted to look her in the eye one last time and put the past to rest for good. I dressed simply and tried to calm my nerves before heading to the meeting. The address led me to an old, decaying warehouse on the edge of town. The air inside was thick with the smell of rot, and the only light came from a single flickering bulb in the corner. I stepped into the warehouse, cautiously, looking for Miriam. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. I was shocked to see Joey standing there instead of her. He looked like he had been living on the streets, his clothes torn and his hair a tangled mess. He was covered in grime, but his eyes were wide and filled with a terrifying, frantic energy. He looked like he had completely lost his mind. "Edward, I knew you would come," Joey rasped, his voice sounding hollow and dead. I stepped back, my skin crawling at the sound of his voice. I asked him where Miriam was and what he was doing there. Joey let out a chilling laugh as he stepped closer to me. "Miriam isn't coming, Edward," he said. "I used her name to get you here so we could finally have a little talk." I felt a wave of dread wash over me. "I have nothing to say to you, Joey," I told him as I backed toward the door. He just threw his head back and started laughing, the sound echoing off the metal walls of the warehouse. His laughter was cold and menacing, sending shivers down my spine. "Nothing to say," he screamed. "You stole my life. You took everything that belonged to me. You are the favorite son of the richest man on earth now, while I am rotting in the gutter," he yelled. "Our parents disowned me. Because of you. How is it fair that you have everything while I have nothing?" My own anger finally boiled over. "I didn't steal anything from you, Joey," I shouted. "You were the one who stole my childhood and used me like a piece of equipment. You made my life a living hell." Before I could say another word, he pulled out a spray can and aimed it at my face. Everything went black before I could even try to run. I felt my knees buckle as I lost consciousness. I woke up with my hands and feet tied tightly with rope. Joey was kneeling over me, pressing a sharp knife against my throat. He had a crazed look in his eyes that told me he was truly dangerous. "I called our old family and your new one," he whispered. "Let's see how much they really love you." I heard the sound of cars screeching to a halt outside the warehouse. The Sterlings and Audrey were the first to burst through the doors. Audrey screamed my name when she saw the knife at my throat. "Let him go, Joey," she cried, her eyes filling with tears of rage. "If you hurt him, I will spend every cent I have to make sure you rot in prison forever," Mr. Sterling yelled. Mrs. Sterling was trembling with fear, asking Joey why he was being so cruel to someone who had only ever helped him. My biological family and Miriam arrived moments later. My mother collapsed onto her knees when she saw us. "Joey, stop this madness," she wailed. "He's your own brother. Please put the knife down." My father looked like he wanted to kill Joey himself. "You are no son of mine," he shouted. Miriam looked absolutely devastated, her face pale with guilt and terror as she watched the blade against my neck. Miriam tried to step forward, her voice shaking as she spoke. "Joey, please, he didn't do anything to you," she pleaded. "If you are angry at someone, be angry at me. Just let Edward go." Joey looked at their terrified faces and let out a sick, twisted smile. He waved the knife around as he shouted about how I had stolen his family and his future. He was completely disconnected from reality. His eyes turned dark and malicious as he looked at the crowd. "If you love him so much, then prove it," he screamed. "Every single one of you, get on your knees right now." I tried to tell him he was insane, but he just pressed the knife harder against my skin. Audrey didn't hesitate for a second, dropping to her knees on the cold concrete. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling followed her lead immediately. Then Miriam fell to her knees, her eyes never leaving me. Finally, my parents and Chloe knelt down as well. They were all begging him to let me go now that they had done what he asked. I couldn't believe they were all willing to humiliate themselves just to save my life. Instead of calming him down, seeing them on their knees made Joey even angrier. "You actually love him this much?" he shrieked. "What happened to loving me? I was supposed to be the one you cared about." He looked at the Sterlings with pure contempt, asking why the richest people in the world would humble themselves for someone like me. He called me trash and demanded to know what made me so special. "I would do more than just kneel," Audrey said, her voice steady and brave. "I would die for him if it meant he walked out of here alive." My father looked at Joey with a broken heart, asking him what had happened to the boy they once loved. My mother begged him to stop, telling him that hurting me wouldn't bring him the happiness he was looking for. She was sobbing, her heart breaking for both of her sons for the first time in her life. Chloe asked him what had turned him into such a monster. Miriam's voice rose to a scream as she demanded that he let me go, telling him that I hadn't done anything to deserve this. Joey didn't seem to hear them at all. He just smiled that terrifying smile again and started dragging me toward the back of the warehouse. The knife was still pressed firmly against my neck. He pulled a small remote out of his pocket and held it up for everyone to see. "Nobody is leaving here today," he whispered. "I rigged the whole place with explosives, and I'm taking us all down together." The room went silent as everyone realized the danger. Before anyone could move, Joey shoved me toward the center of the room and tossed a small device at my feet. He sprinted for the door and slammed it shut, locking us all inside. The warehouse was suddenly filled with a deafening blast as the device exploded. Everyone screamed my name and scrambled toward me through the smoke and fire. They didn't even think about their own safety. By the time the paramedics arrived, the warehouse was a disaster. I realized that everyone had thrown themselves on top of me to shield me from the blast. Since I was at the bottom of the pile, I was miraculously the only one who wasn't seriously hurt. My biological family and Miriam had some nasty burns and shrapnel wounds, but they were stable. The Sterlings, however, were in critical condition because they had been the ones closest to the blast. Audrey was barely conscious as they loaded her into the ambulance. I was hysterical as I held Audrey's hand, begging them all to wake up. We were rushed to the hospital where the doctors informed me that they needed immediate transfusions. They had lost so much blood trying to save me. I tried to give blood myself, but the nurse told me my type wasn't a match. I felt like I was going to lose my mind until Miriam stepped forward. "I have the same blood type as Audrey," she said quietly, her eyes full of sorrow. My parents and Chloe also stepped up, offering their blood for Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. They stood in the donation room together, watching their blood being collected to save the people who had replaced them. It was a strange, silent moment of reckoning for all of them. I stood in the hallway, my eyes fixed on the doors of the operating rooms. I didn't even look toward my biological family. My entire world was focused on the Sterlings, praying that they would make it through. I didn't care about their sacrifices or their pain. My father watched me from the donation chair, the sting of a needle being nothing compared to the pain of seeing his son ignore him so completely. He realized that I had truly moved on. He remembered every time Joey had been in the hospital and how he never left his side. He remembered me standing in the corner, crying silently, and how he hadn't even offered me a hug. Now, he was the one standing in the corner. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him as he felt the cold sting of my indifference. My mother was weeping as she remembered all the toys and attention she showered on Joey while I stood by with nothing. She finally saw the longing in my eyes that she had ignored for 20 years. She was devastated that I wouldn't even look at her. Chloe felt like she couldn't breathe as she remembered every time she had helped Joey bully me. She realized that she had been a willing participant in my suffering. She kept replaying those memories, each one more painful than the last. My coldness toward her felt like a knife being twisted in her gut. She finally understood that some things can't be fixed with a simple "I'm sorry." Miriam looked like she was in a trance, her mind filled with every cruel thing she had ever said to me. She watched me from across the room, desperate for even a single glance. She just wanted to know that I still knew she existed. I never looked back. My focus remained entirely on the people who had truly become my family. They finally realized that this was their punishment. They were experiencing exactly what they had put me through for my entire life. When the doctor finally came out and said they were all going to be okay, I collapsed in tears of joy. I grabbed the doctor's hand and thanked him over and over again. I felt like I could finally breathe again. My biological family and Miriam looked relieved as well, and they started to move toward me to share the moment. I didn't even notice them as I turned and followed the nurses into the recovery room. I was only interested in being with the people who had almost died for me. I sat by their beds for hours, making sure they were comfortable and watching over them as they slept. When Audrey finally opened her eyes, I pulled her into a gentle hug. My heart ached seeing her in so much pain because of me. Feeling her warmth against me was the only thing that made me feel safe again. My old family watched us through the window, their faces filled with a profound sense of loss. They were finally realizing that they were outsiders in my new life. "What do we have to do for him to love us again?" my mother sobbed. My father and Chloe didn't answer because they knew the truth. They had broken my heart too many times, and there was no coming back from it. They couldn't spend all their time wallowing in self-pity because there were still legal matters to attend to. A few days later, a massive scandal broke out in New York City. The Harrison family name was all over the news. My parents had finally done the right thing and turned Joey into the police. It was the hardest thing they had ever had to do, and it tore them apart inside. They had spent their whole lives protecting him, and now they were the ones putting him behind bars. My mother was a mess as she watched the police lead Joey away in handcuffs. My father looked broken, but determined to see justice served. They had given Joey everything, and in the end, he had used that love to destroy himself and everyone around him. I felt a brief pang of sadness when I heard the news, but it passed quickly. I had already made my choice to move on, and their drama drama was no longer my concern. I was focused on my new life and the people who actually cared about me. The Sterlings eventually made a full recovery and were able to come home. A few weeks later, I told Audrey I had a surprise for her. I want to take her somewhere special to celebrate our new beginning. She followed me into the garden, which I had decorated with thousands of flowers and lights. There was a path made of rose petals leading to a small wooden gazebo. It looked like something out of a dream. I had pink roses, her favorite, everywhere, and the air was filled with their sweet scent. Audrey stood there with her mouth open, completely surprised by the setup. Soft music began to play from the speakers as I led her to the center of the gazebo. I got down on one knee and held out a ring. "Audrey, you saved me in more ways than you know," I said, looking up at her. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I love you more than anything. Will you marry me?" Audrey was crying happy tears as she looked into my eyes. Just as she was about to say yes, we were interrupted by the sound of someone running toward us. We both turned to see Miriam standing at the edge of the garden, looking frantic. Miriam was breathless and disheveled, her eyes filled with a desperate kind of hope. She stopped right in front of us, her gaze fixed on me. She looked like she was about to fall apart as she tried to speak. "Edward, please, just listen to me for 1 second," she sobbed. "I know I messed up everything, but I have changed, I swear. I realize that my life means nothing without you in it." She begged for another chance to make things right, claiming she had always loved me. Audrey stepped between us, her expression hard and protective. "He is happy now, Miriam, so just leave him alone," she said firmly. "You have already done enough damage." I looked from Miriam to Audrey, my mind spinning with memories of the past. I remembered how much I used to love Miriam and how I would have done anything just to make her smile. It felt like a lifetime ago. I remembered the pain of her betrayals, and it still hurt to think about it. But I also saw that she had been trying to make amends lately. She had been desperate to earn back my trust, and I could tell she was truly suffering. Then I looked at Audrey, the woman who had stood by me through everything. She had shown me what real love looked like, and she had been my rock during the hardest times of my life. I took a deep breath and realized what I had to do. I looked at Miriam and felt a wave of sadness for what we could have been. "The past is just too painful to revisit, Miriam," I said gently. "It took me a long time to heal from what you did. Audrey is my future now, and she makes me happier than I ever thought possible." I told her that Audrey gave me a sense of security that I had never known. Miriam looked absolutely heartbroken, but she still begged me to reconsider. She promised to spend every day of her life making me happy if I just gave her one more chance. I just shook my head and told her it was over. "It is too late for us, Miriam," I said. I turned away from her and looked at Audrey, my heart full of love for the woman who actually deserved it. Miriam looked like her entire world had ended as she watched me pull Audrey into my arms. I didn't look at her again. I was only interested in the woman who was going to be my wife. I felt a sense of peace that I had never known before. Audrey smiled through her tears, knowing that I had chosen her. I leaned down and kissed her a long, lingering kiss that signaled our commitment to each other. Our friends and the Sterlings erupted into cheers around us. That kiss was the final nail in the coffin of my past life. Miriam watched us, her heart shattering into a million pieces. She finally understood that I was gone forever and there was nothing she could do to bring me back. Our celebration was cut short when Joey suddenly appeared, looking even more deranged than before. I couldn't believe he had actually escaped from custody. I yelled at him to put the knife down before he made things even worse for himself. Joey didn't seem to hear me. He just kept walking toward us with a wild look in his eyes. He kept muttering that it was my fault he had been arrested and that I was going to pay with my life. He looked like he was ready to kill me right there in front of everyone. My parents and Chloe were frozen in shock as they watched Joey raise the knife. He lunged at me, his eyes filled with pure madness. Just as the blade was about to hit me, someone threw themselves in the way. Miriam didn't even hesitate as she jumped in front of me. "If you want to hurt him, you'll have to go through me first," she screamed. Joey didn't even pause. He just plunged a knife deep in her chest with a look of pure insanity. I screamed her name as she collapsed to the ground. Joey was completely gone now, his eyes fixed on me as he raised the knife again. My biological family finally snapped out of their shock and tried to intervene. My father ran forward and tried to get between us, shouting for Joey to stop. Joey didn't even hesitate. He just stabbed his own father in the side. My father groaned in pain, but refused to move out of the way. Blood started soaking through my father's shirt as he struggled to stay on his feet. My mother screamed when she saw him get hit, but she didn't run away. She threw herself at Joey, trying to grab the knife and stop him from hurting me. "He's your brother, Joey. Please stop," she wailed as she clawed his arms. Joey just shoved her to the ground and turned back to me, his eyes filled with a terrifying, single-minded hatred. He lunged at me again, the knife glinting in the light. Chloe threw herself in front of me just as the knife was coming down. She took the blow to her arm, screaming in pain as blood started pouring from the wound. She didn't move, though, she just kept her body between me and the knife. Miriam somehow found the strength to get up and grab Joey from behind. She saw the flashing lights of the police cars arriving and told Chloe to get me out of there. She was bleeding heavily, but she refused to let him go. Chloe grabbed my hand and we ran toward the house as fast as we could. I could hear Joey screaming behind us as he tried to break free from Miriam's grip. He kept stabbing at her, but she just held on tighter, refusing to let him reach me. Miriam kept telling him that his hatred was destroying him, even as she grew weaker. The sound of the sirens finally seemed to break through his madness. He dropped the knife and collapsed onto the grass, his eyes finally showing a hint of fear. The police burst into the garden and tackled Joey to the ground. Audrey and I ran back to help the others while the paramedics arrived. Everyone was bleeding, but Miriam looked like she was in the worst shape by far. I stayed at the hospital until everyone was out of surgery. My father was the first to wake up, and he looked at me with a mixture of shame and relief. He seemed surprised that I was still there. My mother woke up and immediately started crying, begging for my forgiveness. Chloe was still weak from her surgery, but she looked at me with eyes full of sorrow. They all seemed to realize just how much they had messed up. The news about Miriam was devastating. The doctor told me that she had suffered severe internal damage and might never wake up again. She was in a deep coma, and they didn't know if she would ever recover. I was in shock, unable to process the fact that she might be gone forever. I spent the next few days at the hospital, checking in on everyone and making sure they had what they needed. I felt a strange sense of duty toward them after they had risked their lives for me. I helped my father with his physical therapy and made sure my mother ate her meals. I even helped the nurses change Chloe's bandages. I did it all without saying much, just focusing on the tasks at hand. My family watched me with increasing guilt as the days went by. My father tried to speak to me several times, but the words always seemed to fail him. Finally, he caught my arm as I was leaving one afternoon. "Edward, please, we need to talk," he whispered, his voice cracking. "We know we don't deserve it, but please, can you ever forgive us?" My mother and Chloe looked at me with desperate eyes, waiting for my answer. I stopped and looked at them, my heart heavy with the weight of our shared past. "I can't forgive you for what you did," I said quietly. "I'm only here because you saved my life, and I owe you that much. You spent 20 years treating me like I didn't exist," I reminded them. "A few days of regret can't erase a lifetime of pain. Those memories are a part of me now, and they aren't going away." My words hit them like a physical blow. My mother started sobbing again, and my father just looked at his hands in silence. Chloe looked like she wanted to disappear into the hospital bed. "Once you're out of here, I'm going to live my own life," I told them firmly. "I don't want you to contact me again. I just want to forget about the Harrisons and start over." I walked out of the room without looking back. My departure was the final end of our relationship, and they knew it. I was leaving them behind for good this time. My father watched the door close, his hand reaching out as if to stop me. He was haunted by memories of every time he had ignored me or pushed me away. He realized that his chance to be a father had long since passed. He remembered me as a little boy, watching him from the doorway while he played with Joey. He remembered how he would always tell me to go away because he was busy. He remembered every birthday of mine that he had completely forgotten. He had spent thousands of dollars on Joey's parties while never even getting me a card. The regret was overwhelming, making it hard for him to even breathe. He finally understood the magnitude of his failure. "Edward," he whispered, his voice full of sorrow. My mother was on the floor, her fists beating against the tiles as she sobbed. The sound of her grief filled the quiet hospital room. She remembered when I had a fever, and she just gave me some Tylenol before going back to sit with Joey. She remembered how I had begged her to come to my school play, and how she had canceled at the last minute because Joey was feeling sad. She realized how many times she had broken my heart. She understood now why I couldn't forgive her. She had been a terrible mother, and there was no fixing it. She just kept repeating her apology through her tears, lost in her own misery. Chloe slid down the wall and hid her face in her hands. She remembered helping Joey steal my favorite toys just to see me cry. She remembered calling me a loser for not fighting back. She remembered pretending not to know me in the school hallways because she was embarrassed by my cheap clothes. Every memory was like a knife to her heart. She realized that she had been just as bad as Joey. "Please come back, Edward," she sobbed into the empty room. "I will be a better sister, I promise." But there was no one there to hear her. I was already long gone. The room was filled with the sound of their combined grief as they finally faced the truth of their actions. They knew that their apologies were too little, too late. They had broken me, and I wasn't coming back to be fixed. My absence was a wound that would never heal for them. They were destined to live with the guilt of what they had done for the rest of their lives. They were finally reaping exactly what they had sown. 2 years had gone by, and I still visited Miriam every single week. I would sit by her bed and talk to her, hoping that one day she would hear me. It was a habit I couldn't seem to break. The morning sun was hitting her face, making her look peaceful in her sleep. Joey was sentenced to life without parole, I told her quietly, he is never going to hurt anyone ever again. I told her about how the art world had finally recognized my work and how my name was on all my trophies now. I had become a successful artist and my shows were selling out. I felt like I was finally living the life I was meant to have. I am getting married to Audrey next month, I added with a smile. She has been my rock through everything, and I can't imagine my life without her. I looked out the window, my mind drifting back to the old days. I told her about a dream I had recently of being a little boy in the Harrison Garden. I had fallen and scraped my knee, and I was trying so hard not to cry. No one in my family had even noticed I was hurt. My parents were too busy with Joey to care, I whispered. But you came running over and helped me up. You were the first person who ever looked at me with genuine worry in your eyes. I remembered her telling me it was going to be okay as she carried me inside to fix my knee. That was the day I realized that I wasn't completely alone in the world. It was the moment I started to fall in love with her. I told her how much I had relied on her after that day, only to realize years later that it was all a lie. Knowing that her kindness was just a way to keep me close to Joey had destroyed me. I hated you for that, Miriam, I said. I admitted that my hatred for her had been all-consuming for a while. My voice shook as I remembered the betrayal. It was a pain that I'd lived with for a very long time. But I don't hate you anymore, I told her. I've let go of the love and the hate. I'm finally at peace with myself and my life. I looked at her peaceful face and felt a sense of closure. This is the last time I'm coming to see you, Miriam, I said as a single tear fell onto her hand. I need to focus on my new life now. I hope you wake up soon so you can start yours too. I wiped the tear away and stood up to leave. I took one last look at her before walking out the door. I walked down the hallway with my head held high, finally ready to leave my past behind for good. I was finally ready to embrace my real future. I drove home to Audrey, who was already in the kitchen cooking my favorite meal. She gave me a big smile and a hug as soon as I walked through the door. How was the visit? She asked softly. I told her that I had said everything I needed to say. I'm ready to focus on us now, I told her as I held her close. She promised me that our future was going to be beautiful. I looked up at the moon and realized how much my life had changed. I was no longer the unwanted boy who lived in Joey's shadow. I was a man who was loved and valued for who he was. I am now living in a world where I am surrounded by love. You should never assume the world is cold just because you haven't found your place in it yet. Love might be late, but you have to keep loving yourself in the meantime. Once you find the strength to walk away from people who drain you, you will realize just how bright your own light can be. When you aren't being respected at the table, you have to be brave enough to get up and leave. You have to build your own sanctuary where you can truly thrive. You weren't born to be a supporting character in someone else's story. You were born to be the star of your own. You don't need anyone else to tell you what you are worth. You are a miracle exactly as you are, and you deserve all the love in the world. Always remember that you are enough.